Chris Schnee, and I write science fiction and fantasy. Today I have some magic items for you. These are ideas about artifacts suitable for a story or a game, each with an adventure hook provided. You may use these ideas freely. Without any further ado, I give you 9 magical tomes. 1. The Heroes Rise and Fall. This gilt-edged book is a history of various heroes throughout the ages, some of them probably fictional. Each section is divided into 2. One half is about how that person became a hero, and the other about how he came to ruin. Anyone reading this book who isn't already a heroic figure, an adventurer, gets inspired. The next day, he wakes up ready to take on the world. Better yet, he actually gets more powerful. Reading this book makes someone into a potential hero, with a subtle boost to endurance, charisma, or other attributes depending on which specific story or stories were read. Careful with the stories about non-human heroes. Reading the depressing downfall part has no effect. These powers fade if the reader doesn't actually go out and do something adventurous for at least a season, but become permanent after that. However, if the reader is already a hero, this book is demoralizing. The negative part of each story is a lot more influential. It can cause low-level heroes to have a crisis of faith and wake up the next day feeling that the adventuring life isn't for them after all. If they give in to this feeling, they actually lose most of their abilities and are likely to become small-time farmers and shopkeepers. In this way, the book can be devastating to an adventuring guild or potential threats to a major villain. Yes, it's possible to read the book again, but it can only affect the same person once a season. There's a catch here. The effects take place while the reader next sleeps. Anyone paying attention to that part might realize there's a connection to dream magic. A wizard can learn some useful magic techniques by studying how this book works, or how to undo the curse it imposes on existing adventurers. The true power of this artifact is to raise a large number of heroic figures in short order, preparing a whole band of adventurers who are qualified to do some mighty deed. The question is, did the creator of this book have a specific task in mind, encoded somehow in a book that's dangerous to read? 2. Invitation to Arcana. This pamphlet was mass-produced using a crude printing press by a clan of wizards called Blackthorn. Its yellowed pages explain magic in enthusiastic terms. Magic is a force for good, and wizards are wonderful people that you should welcome, hire, and sleep with. One page is printed with a spiral design and a special ink, getting more diluted towards the edges. It tells you to use the meditation technique taught on the previous page to see if you can see the spiral. Anyone with any magic sensing powers can see part of the design in glittering green, and more turns of the spiral appear depending on your sensitivity. So this page acts as a magic meter. There is scholarly debate about whether you should really measure magic potential along a single axis like this, but hey, this is an intro booklet printed at low cost. The pamphlet isn't itself a magic item, but studying it can help people awaken any latent talent they might have. Many readers can develop a minor spell power after practicing the techniques within. The last few pages describe one of several basic spells, usually one to make a piece of amber glow or to telekinetically control a specially carved stick. A magic wand, in other words. Finally, the pamphlet is a literal invitation. If you can see most of the spiral design, it says, you should seek out the Blackthorn family for a job, or to buy the more advanced books they sell, or for their eugenics program because they're trying to breed better mages. The town they live in is a haven for wizards looking to make a name for themselves or to start a family. There's at least one known incident of a cruel prank being played on people by giving them a doctored pamphlet, meant to make them think they're bursting with magical potential. One member of the Blackthorn family was born with no magic at all, and he's been using what skills he does have to enact a secret vendetta against the prankster, and against all other people who would abuse others of a lack of mystic power, including some of his own family members. 3. The Tablet of Blistering Complaint. This is a clay tablet with an ancient message carved on it. When first found, if you can read the original language, it's an angry complaint letter against a crooked copper merchant who delivered inferior ingots. Who do you think you are, treating my servant this way? And so on. Holding this tablet fills a person with righteous indignation, and a sense that this item should be used to write out complaints and curses against someone who's been doing unsavory business. The surprising thing is that these curses tend to work. Writing anything to the effect of, I hope you go out of business, or I hope you're arrested, or wishing personal harm on the merchant inflicts a curse of general bad luck on the victim. Creatively worded curses about the target's ancestry have been known to cause physical changes too. Physically, it's a hard, baked clay tablet, but it softens in the hands of anyone holding a stylus. The writer must inscribe the message on the tablet, including an explanation of why the target is a cheat, and then bake the message. The user must sincerely believe that the target deserves it, too. The curse lasts until the tablet is shattered or used on another target. The tablet doesn't actually need to be delivered to the victim. Curiously, the victim gets a sense that someone really hates him, and exactly what choice words the user wrote, and might put two and two together. He might ask a party of adventurers to hunt down the wicked sorcerer who called him the thieving son of a flatulent donkey. 4. The Scribes Primer. A sage named Rosiah wanted to spread what he called the magic of literacy. He created a book with a simple tan cover with large friendly letters. Opening the book reveals that it's written in your main language, whatever that may be. It's an excellent guide to basic reading, writing, and written arithmetic. The magical power of this book is small, but it acts to guide the reader toward literacy with supernatural speed. A single week of study is enough for most people to have basic proficiency. Someone who reads this and is already literate can still get a little benefit from it, in the form of a permanent bonus to learn other languages. Also better penmanship. Rosiah was a stickler for that. Rosiah knew that having just a few copies of the primer would limit its usefulness, so he worked a copying spell into the book too. If you're so inclined, you may spend a little money and around 10 hours of work to copy it as well as you can. No mystical skills required, but there's a brief ritual of prayer and origami involved. You do of course need ink and paper, along with a cover matching the original style. If you're successful at this test of linguistics and patience, you create a copy of the primer which duplicates its powers perfectly. Well, almost perfectly. After many years, Rosiah's work became common throughout the land, which was a good thing. But through accident or malice, a few copies were different. One of these is blamed on the sages of Python Mountain. It teaches the reader some mistakenly bizarre and suggestive phrasing. Probably an accident. A second variant is from the scholars of the Prentish Republic. This one only teaches you the Prentish language, along with the reasons that Prentish culture is superior. A third version patiently explains how all of reality can be explained in terms of the 19 demon lords. It uses symbols representing their domains and is used as the basis for a written language. Studying this book helps the reader to understand why you should worship the demon lords and spread this tainted manual to other people. It even contains an interesting spell or two, making the book's aura stronger than normal. An order of crusading knights wants to burn all these dark primers, and needs the help of some adventurous folk to track down the cultists who are copying them. 5. Lonnie's Camp Cookbook. This battered, stained cookbook still smells of spices and sauces. Scratching and sniffing is optional, but recommended. It was the personal cookbook of Lonnie the Ladle, head cook for a heroic army. Lonnie was useless with a sword, but a master with a kitchen knife. It was said that he could turn whatever ingredients he had into a feast. This book is why. So great was his devotion to the culinary arts, that he was visited by what he claimed was the god of bounty, offering him the secrets of food. He woke up with this tome in his kitchen. Indeed, whatever ingredients you may have on hand, if you have this book, there's a recipe using them. Certain mystical passes of the whisk are described therein, certain sacrifices of bread and fire and oil. These delicious rites create 13 sweet rolls with holes in them, one of which must be sacrificed. If you have performed the recipe in the last month, your cooking powers become truly magical. Not only do you have recipes on hand for anything remotely edible, but your cooking tools become clean and bright, and their touch banishes any rot, poison, or corruption when you use them. Simple foodstuffs also multiply when no one is looking closely at the pots and ovens, so that they can feed as many as 10 times the usual number of people. The taste and nutrition are even improved. What, all you have on hand is a dead, diseased horse and some grass and random mushrooms? No problem. Lonnie lived to a ripe old age with the knighthood and a popular restaurant. After his death, there was much dispute about what to do with the cookbook. The kingdom's navy petitioned for ownership of it, since their sailors often had to make do with moldy biscuits and salt pork, but the king vetoed that for fear of losing the book. Since then, it's been deployed on military campaigns on land, trusted to the most honored of cooks, and protected by the apron guard. Recently, a neighboring kingdom has requested to borrow Lonnie's relic to handle a famine, claiming that they can increase its food output dramatically. The king fears that this is a ruse, and demands that not only the neighbors share the enhancement trick, but that they prove themselves worthy as true food lovers. So, there's a hasty banquet to arrange in the midst of a famine, and important people are coming with their own agendas, while the lives of many common people hang in the balance. 6. The Orc Smarts Book. This is a leather book with thick, sturdy pages, almost indestructible. There's some blood on the outer corners and across one page, and grease stains on most pages. This copy's inner cover says, "This book for Crusher." It was written by Verikin, a well-meaning mage who wanted to improve the lives of the roving orc tribes of the barbarian lands. The idea was that she would distribute these and teach these dangerous people the value of friendship, learning, farming, and peaceful trades. Eventually they would become good neighbors. Great idea, good intentions, skillful execution. Orcs who read this thing are affected by its magic. The word reading has to be taken loosely here. It's mainly a picture book showing happy orcs tilling fields, trading animal pelts to delighted humans, or dancing and playing music. Anyway, the readers really do get smarter, but not any nicer. Your standard orc says things like, "Knock the humies out!" An orc who has learned from Da Orc Smart's book knows how to write "knock the humies out," and sometimes even to write a simple essay about why humans are evil monsters who have too much loot. They're also getting better at military tactics and tool-making, so there's that. There is now a collection of improved orcs exchanging letters between tribes. They're discussing how to unify their war bands and impose a permanent cure for the human menace. Already they've raided several cities. Some human scholars have declared that the orcs are right. It's not clear whether the book is affecting their minds too, or whether they just hate their own culture that much. Meanwhile, the original author of Da Orc Smart's book is horrified. She's frantically trying to write something equally magical that can accomplish the original goal of helping the orcs to become friendly neighbors. She could definitely use some help. Part of Verikin's problem is that she imposed this book on the orcs from above, using her scholarly knowledge and not having much actual contact with the ones she was trying to help. That's where adventurers might come in, both to convince her of the problem and to protect her on a dangerous research trip. She might even discover that this isn't the first time orcs have been affected en masse by a dangerous spell. 7. The Dragon Friends Devotion Book. This book is a pocket-sized leather volume whose print seems burned into the paper. If found in the wild, the pages contain many margin doodles of dragons, dragon scales, wing designs, dragons lounging on piles of treasure, and so on. The artist's skill obviously improved while doing these. The book itself is a production of the Church of Mighty Wings, founded by a human bard who became a fan of the scaly creatures after an encounter with some fun-loving kobolds. At face value, it's a collection of dragon-related prayers, parables, witty sayings, life advice, history, and erotic poetry. All are directed to the glorious dragon gods, which most scholars deny exist. Whether or not they do, the book has real effects. One can study the book, read its prayers aloud, and after a week of ritual purity, perform a certain ceremony. This involves candles, small gemstone offerings, and praise of the dragons. Doing this process successfully requires some religious knowledge. It causes the reader to transform partially into a dragon, which usually means scaly limbs, a tail, and maybe horns. There's a bonus to endurance, lifespan, and supposedly charisma. Definitely a bonus to ego, at least. The book says you should read a great deal of religious significance into the scale color and the type of minor breath weapon you get. As far as most scholars know, it's just random, but what do those unbelievers know? The Church of Mighty Wings is said to be researching ritual that can turn someone into a real dragon. There's a schism in progress between believers who think this is a good thing, and those who see it as blasphemy. They'd like to hire some outsiders with no stake in the debate to go ask an elder dragon in person. The dragon has probably never even heard of the church, and will probably have a strong reaction of some kind to it. Both sides will try to persuade the hirelings to ask the question correctly, and will be happy to offer them access to the part dragon ritual. 8. The Needful Equation. This is the plain black journal of an academic named Riley. He specialized in mathematics. The writing gets increasingly crazed and frantic toward the end, but it records the research of its author. The pages and cover are sheared off in one corner, as by a perfectly sharp blade. Riley designs city infrastructure and fortifications for a living, but his passion was for more abstract geometry and figuring. He became convinced that there are patterns to reality, perhaps even a set of fundamental laws expressible as mathematics. He lectured students about his theories and increasingly found that they were too foolish and close-minded to understand him. They called him mad. He became more and more socially isolated, even as his studies expanded his mind. Reading this book requires mathematics skill to understand fully. Without that, you can get the gist of what happened, but not the full effect. That's a mixed blessing. Riley became convinced that there were other dimensions underlying his own, beginning to grasp theories about alternate planes of reality, planes where travel might be faster, resources more plentiful, maybe even holding creatures to greet, creatures who would no doubt be friendly and delighted to make peaceful contact with humanity. Reading the book and studying the math in it grants anyone with magical ability the power to cast some basic spells of space manipulation. These include a short-distance teleport, a way to make a region of space thicker so that it acts like a shield, to weaken gravity, or to open a tiny pocket dimension useful for storage or hiding. Riley was obviously working on something bigger, something he called the Needful Equation. The more of the spells you learn, the more you might feel compelled to study the Needful Equation yourself, and the more likely you are to develop the delusion that there are things lurking in the shadows, watching you from wherever there's a right angle. It's probably just paranoia. You might encounter a family worrying about their scholarly relative who's been studying the book, acting more and more disturbed despite learning magic and being overjoyed to gain new powers. They'd like someone to go check on him. They likely ask this without knowing that he's already vanished, and that his room now contains a portal to elsewhere, and signs of a struggle. 9. The Portmaster's Log. In the port city of Strigan, there lived a harbour master who fancied himself a storyteller. He had a bad leg after a terrible sailing accident early in his career, and he settled down to manage the piers and warehouses and seedy taverns of his home city. Not a bad life. This book is a battered but sturdy ledger with a locked wooden cover and a smell of salt water. At first glance, it's a boring log of ships going in and out, but after the first few pages it fills much of its space with little stories about the ships, presented in vivid detail. The harbour master has some latent magical ability that leaked into his work. Just reading his written accounts gives the reader a powerful imaginary scene, with sound and smell, and the creaking of the deck beneath your feet, and the cry of the seagulls, and the scent of that blasted guy who won't stop playing the accordion. Where was I? Oh yes. The writer ran into trouble when he noticed that some of the details he made up were retroactively true. When he invented an anecdote about one ship running into pirates, the sailors suddenly found that several of them had wounds they didn't remember getting. The harbour master didn't understand that he'd somehow caused this until a later incident, wherein he wrote up some nonsense about how an incoming ship had had half their crew transformed into mermaids. This also turned out to have really happened. They were all rather surprised. In confusion, the harbour master got drunk and explained to a local wizard that he might have had something to do with the trouble. Together they tried an experiment. They wrote in the book that the next ship would have treasure aboard, and lo, it happened. So they now had on their hands a potentially very powerful reality-warping artifact that would only affected local ships and crew. They never got to explore the exact limits of its power because an angel of fate intervened. This was a frightening creature who appeared to the two men and denounced them for fraying the fabric of creation. The angel confiscated the book and vanished. The experience was so unnerving that it took the harbour master and the wizard a while to realize they'd been scammed. That was no angel, just a man. So now the book might be anywhere, and maybe it affects ports other than that one, or it's being used in secret in the same area. When a bizarre accident happens involving two copies of the same ship appearing in the same harbour, it's a sign that the thief messed up and revealed his presence. Now there's a way to track him down and get the book into the right hands, but whose are those? This has been a collection of 9 magical tomes. I hope the ideas here help to inspire you in your own storytelling. If there's a particular kind of world building or storytelling you'd like to hear about, please leave a comment or consider signing up for Patreon. Thanks for listening. Until next time.